Hello and welcome. I'm Annette Reeder from the biblicalnutritionist.com. And today we're talking about iodine. You may think that iodized salt is all you need to know. Well, I'm here to challenge that today. In fact, I have a special guest with us, Dr. Brownstein, who's going to also challenge your belief about, well, iodized salt is all I need. That's not true. And we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about today, is iodine good for you? And what are the risks and side effects that you really need to know? You may have just accepted what you've been told all these years, but I'm going to challenge that today and say, hey, forget what you've been told, listen to this, and because your health is going to change just by listening to what we're going to say today. Well, thanks for letting me share with you God's recipe for excellent health. It always includes 3 ingredients. Number 1 is being confident in the foods that God created for you. Number 2 is being confident in your health. And number 3 is being confident in how much He loves and understands you. So thanks for letting me share that with you. Now, for today's video, I am interviewing Dr. David Brownstein. And Dr. David Brownstein is from West Bloomfield, Michigan. He has the Center for Holistic Medicine, and he has written over a dozen bestsellers. And the one we're referring to today is iodine and why you need it. This is a very important topic. It's actually more important than I ever thought possible. I didn't realize how much iodine was important. I knew, okay, there were times I was studying it. Okay, I'll go grab some seaweed kelp or something like that. Maybe that'll make the difference. It did make a difference, but it wasn't enough of the difference that I now understand after studying his book. Again, the great importance of iodine in your diet. So whether you're dealing with cancer, whether you have young children, whether you have older adults in your home, you need to understand why iodine is so important and what are the risks if you don't have enough. So today, I just want to welcome Dr. David Brownstein to our call today. It is such a delight to have you and to share with us your wealth of knowledge that you have on this topic of iodine. And I know it's your favorite subject, so I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thanks for having me, Annette.
Oh, totally our pleasure. So get us started. Is iodine good for you? And are we getting enough?
So iodine is an essential item for the human body. That means we can't manufacture it. We have to get it either from our diet or somehow in our environment, breathing it or getting it through our skin or something like that. We can't live without it. Every cell in the body needs and requires iodine. It's concentrated in the glandular tissue. The glandular tissue includes the thyroid gland, the ovaries, the uterus, the breast, the prostate, the pancreas. And we have a specialized mechanism set up to concentrate iodine in that glandular tissue because to maintain the normal architecture of the glandular tissue, you need adequate amounts of iodine. That's been shown in animal, test tube, and human studies. And if we have normal architecture, it's normal. It's how it should be. It's how we were designed by our maker to have the thyroid look or the breast look or the ovaries look. There's no bumps and lumps and growths and things like that. It's normal tissue. Well, I call this the iodine deficiency continuum because in our country, our iodine levels have been falling over 50% over the last 50 years, according to the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. That's across the entire country. And we're facing severe consequences from that. And the consequences are women in the U.S. suffer a 1 in 7 lifetime risk of developing breast cancer. So think about that. If a woman lives long enough, 1 in 7 U.S. women out of the hundreds of millions of women that are in our country are going to have breast cancer at some time diagnosed in their lifetime. 1 in 3 men, the same thing with prostate cancer. We have thyroid cancer as our fastest growing cancer, and we have epidemic increases of pancreatic, ovarian, and uterine cancer. And I say that the underlying theme behind all this is iodine deficiency. Do I think it's the sole cause of all this cancer that we're facing? You know, cancer is our second major cause of death in the U.S. next to heart disease. It's not the sole cause, but in the pie that's causing cancer in people, iodine is a huge piece of that pie. And the iodine deficiency continuum is that if we have enough iodine, let's call this normal architecture of the glandular tissue. And iodine deficiency, the first thing that happens is you start to get cysts growing. So you get thyroid cysts or breast cysts or ovarian cysts or prostate cysts. If it goes on longer, those cysts become hard and nodular. goes on longer. If you take a biopsy of that tissue, they become larger and it becomes hyperplastic under a microscope appearance, which is a precursor to cancer. In animal test tube and human studies, iodine's been shown to halt and be able to reverse this continuum. And that's what I see in my practice. That, I came about iodine about 10 years into my holistic practice when I found I was treating so many patients for hypothyroidism or an underactive thyroid with thyroid hormone, natural thyroid hormone. And although my patients were getting better, I was puzzled, why would so many people need thyroid hormone just to feel good? I did not think we were designed by our maker that just because you're getting older, you need thyroid hormone to feel good. That doesn't make sense to me. I've always felt that, and I've realized through testing tens, if not hundreds of thousands of chemistries and supporting the body's nutrition and hormonal pathways, that great things can happen in the body and people can age gracefully and be active and have good brain function until the end of their life. That iodine's part of that continuum. And so I was treating people with thyroid hormone. Although they were getting better, I was not happy with having to do that. So I started to look at the items that make thyroid hormone work, the constituents of the biochemical pathways of making a thyroid hormone. And I would look at selenium and magnesium and B vitamins and vitamin C and iodine. You need iodine to make any hormone in the body, including thyroid hormone. You need it to make adrenal hormones, sex hormones. So when I started to use the right form of iodine in the right amounts, I found that I didn't need so many people taking thyroid hormone to feel good because I was treating now the underlying cause why they're having a thyroid problem. I went from the first 10 years of my practice with 3/4 of my patients taking thyroid hormone to now less than a quarter of them needing thyroid hormone to treat hypothyroidism. Most can be treated just fine by supplying iodine, getting the thyroid gland to work normally, just as we were designed by our maker to do. Now, as a consequence of that, when they get their iodine levels up, their fibrocystic breast disease gets better, fibrocystic ovary disease gets better, fibroids on the uterus gets better, their thyroid cysts and nodules get better. When I was young, early in my career, I saw pancreatic cancer in patients. It was in old patients, and it was in alcoholic patients or drug abusers. Now I'm diagnosing pancreatic cancer in people in their 40s. I'm diagnosing breast cancer in teenage girls. Late teenage girls are getting diagnosed with breast cancer. I just went to a funeral from a 28-year-old patient who died of stage 4 breast cancer. I didn't see this stuff 30 years ago. And I think that it's this iodine deficiency continuum that's gotten worse over my career and worse across the US over the last 5 decades. And it's leading to more glandular problems. And unless we recognize that we need to support the human body, supply it with the right nutrients it needs, balance the human body and help the body detox from toxins, we're going to keep going down the wrong health pathways and spending so much money on drugs that aren't working and therapies that aren't working. And we spend 20% of our GNP on healthcare right now. What are we getting for it? We're worse than every Western country out there on longevity, on maternal mortality at birth, and neonatal mortality, and every other health indicator that's out there. And iodine is a big part of that. We need to recognize iodine deficiency is out there. My partners and I have tested over 8,000 patients. Over 97% are deficient in iodine in their first visit. The vast majority is significantly deficient in iodine, and it puts these patients at risk for glandular disease, and it particularly puts them at risk for cancer of the glandular disease, such as breast cancer, pancreatic cancer, thyroid cancer, ovarian cancer, uterine cancer, prostate cancer. We all know people with all these illnesses, and iodine's cheap. It's effective, and our maker designed us with this intricate mechanism to concentrate iodine in our glandular tissue for a reason. We need to give it iodine, and that's not happening these days.
So would you suggest someone can just change their diet, or is it something that we just have to step into and supplement for?
So the ultimate way for every nutritional item that you're looking at to either supplement with or to optimize, let's get it from our diet first. Why we don't want to have to supplement things for everything. The problem is iodine levels have gone down in our food supply. Every piece of our food supply, iodine has declined over the last 5 decades. The largest source of iodine in the world right now is in the ocean. But we polluted our oceans. We polluted our oceans with toxic halogens, fluoride and bromide. Iodine is part of the halogen family in the periodic table on group 17 on the halides on the right side of the pathway. And I mean, right side of the periodic table. And those halogens include bromide, fluoride, I should say them in the order of the size they're in: fluoride, chloride, bromide, and iodine. Two of those halides are essential. We can't live without them: chloride and iodine. Chloride's part of salt, and iodine. Two of the halides are toxic, non-essential items that we don't need in our diet, and they poison thousands of enzymes and cause problems: bromide and fluoride. The problem we've got is our exposure to bromide and fluoride is well above what our predecessors were, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, our great-great-grandparents. And that, when you get these toxic halides in our environment and in our diet and in our food and drink and our consumer items, that it causes iodine to and chloride to get kicked out of the body. And I call this the double whammy of iodine. Our exposure to toxic halides has increased. At the same time, our food supply for iodine has gone down, and it's made us more iodine deficient. That's why we're seeing so much more breast cancer, thyroid cancer, ovarian cancer, uterine cancer, pancreatic cancer than our predecessors have seen. And I don't see any way out of this unless we rectify this iodine deficiency problem.
All right. And how do you suggest we do that?
Well, I mean, the first thing is, the worst doctor in the world is the person who's a doctor for himself or herself. So find a healthcare practitioner who's literate and knowledgeable about iodine. Now, there are few and far between, but they're out there. And if your doctor doesn't know anything about iodine, find one who does. But more importantly, educate yourself on this. That's why I write my books. I've written 16 books. This is my book on iodine. The books are written for everybody to understand them. And, if you don't understand someone's writing on something in the healthcare realm, either they're hiding something from you or they don't understand it fully. So I try and write it so everyone can understand it, because I'm not the brightest fish in the sea. And I want people, I can see what's happening in my practice, and I want people to understand it as I see it. So I think it's important to work with someone. And it's also important to get these toxic halides out of your diet and your environment. You shouldn't be drinking fluoridated water. You shouldn't be ingesting bromide in food and drink. Bromide's in vegetable oils, is brominated vegetable oil. Bromide's in flour products and bakery products. But you can buy flour and bakery products that don't have bromide in them. You can drink water that doesn't have fluoride, and you can supplement with iodine after you get your levels checked and you see that you're low. And my average dose of iodine in patients is 25 to 50 milligrams of a combination of iodine and iodide, such as Lugol solution or tableted Lugol solution. And this is 400 to 2,000 times the RDA for iodine. I might be off on those amounts a little bit, the numbers. But this is the RDA for iodine was 150 micrograms per day. That RDA was set about 100 years ago to prevent goiter of the, swelling of the thyroid gland. The RDA back then was adequate to prevent goiter of the thyroid, but it still wasn't enough to supply iodine to the breasts and the ovaries and the uterus and the prostate and the skin and the muscles and everywhere else in the body that iodine needs to go. And today's world is not even close to being enough. So educating yourself is the first thing to do, and then working with a healthcare person who's knowledgeable about this stuff. And if your healthcare person isn't, find one who is, because we're out there.
So in the back of your book, I noticed you have some references to physicians who can help people. So they have somewhere to go without just Googling and trying to find a doctor that's going to work. In your book, you talk about the importance of iodine before pregnancy. Can you elaborate on that?
So it's been known for over 100 years that a young woman who is of pregnancy age needs adequate amounts of iodine before she becomes pregnant or during pregnancy to supply enough iodine for the baby so the baby's thyroid gland and the endocrine glands can develop normally. That has been known. That's nothing alternative there. That's just a fact in medicine. It's also known that when a woman of pregnancy age is deficient in iodine and becomes pregnant, that that baby is going to have abnormal development of their glandular tissue and is more prone to having thyroid problems, breast problems, uterine problems, prostate problems, as they get older. And I mentioned earlier in our talk that, I'm seeing I'm diagnosing teenage girls with breast cancer now. That wasn't the case 30 years ago. It's because their iodine deficiency problem got worse. Now, it's not only glandular problems, but it's the brain and the neurologic tissue needs iodine to form normally. It is well known and well established in the medical literature that iodine deficiency during pregnancy leads to lower IQ, that it never reverses itself. That has been written about through multiple different countries and multiple different populations. And so I always, in the US, the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey shows that the average iodine level of a young woman in the United States is deficient in iodine according to WHO criteria, which is too low. They rely on the RDA for iodine as establishing their needs. And in my book, I write about how the RDA is to supply the minimum amount of iodine to prevent goiter, but it's not enough for the body's needs for iodine. And certainly not in our toxic world today with our exposure to those toxic halides I mentioned earlier.
Exactly. Well, the RDA is very similar in that to all regards to every nutrient they have out there. It's always just the basic minimum. All right, one more topic. What about children? You have a chapter here on children, ADHD, autism, and iodine. So you mentioned just now about pregnancy. If the mom is deficient, then the child's going to be deficient. So if a mom is deficient and children have these issues, can iodine help?
So if the mom is deficient in iodine through pregnancy, they're going to have abnormal neurological development. That can lead to permanent lower IQs. And there have been studies correlating low iodine in moms who are pregnant with development of ADHD and neurologic disorders as kids get older. And the correlations are very strong with that. So if I think about when I was a kid. I grew up I was born in 1963, really grew up in the late 60s and 70s through elementary school and middle school. Where were all the ADHD kids back then? Where were they? I don't recall them. I don't recall people going crazy in school. And look, some of us got in some trouble, but it was minor stuff. And it was where's the mess that's going on now? And I think that it's driven by nutritional deficiencies, iodine being part of that. And in my practice, the smartest kids that I see are the ones where the moms are taking decent amounts of iodine going into pregnancy. And it's really something. These are I see this over and over and over. And when I lecture about iodine, I quote these ADHD studies and say that this is where I think the problem is going on. And it's not that ADHD kids are born with a Ritalin deficiency syndrome. That they're born with nutritional deficiencies, and if the nutritional deficiencies start when the mom is pregnant with the baby, and that needs to be rectified before the mother becomes pregnant. So my whole focus has been educating people and my patients to take care of themselves. And for women, it's particularly important because you're going to carry a baby in here that you're responsible for, and you're responsible for giving this baby the best chance they have in life. And it's your responsibility to ensure that you eat good, take care of yourself. You're not doing drugs. You're not, doing bad things while you're pregnant. You're responsible for more than yourself. And that includes getting good nutrition in.
All right. So children that already have ADHD and autism, can taking iodine help?
Yes. Correcting nutritional imbalances, detoxifying can help. We've seen kids improve and be able to get off these medications. And it's a little bit of work, but it can be done. And a lot of it's cleaning up the diet and getting them on the right food and getting, supporting their basic nutrition. We were designed with a good blueprint by our maker that if we can give the support that blueprint that the biochemistry needs, body can do wonderful things. The problem becomes when that blueprint or that biochemistry is off kilter and it's not being supplied with what it needs, and it's being blocked with toxins and chemicals and drugs that are poisoning enzymes and blocking receptors. That's where the problem becomes.
Got it. That's a great. And what I love is that it's a very inexpensive supplement, and I'll put links to those supplements down below so people can just grab that so you know which one is the best to get. And this is all by your recommendations in your book. So we're not just like grabbing one off the Amazon shelf. We're actually using the ones that you've already studied and proven that they are the best.
I've been studying iodine for over 20 years, and it's a really fascinating subject. For whatever reason, iodine resonates with people. Everyone's interested in iodine. And you bring up iodine, there's a few things, a few key nutrients you bring up to people, a few key holistic things. Iodine's one of them, where everyone's ears perk up. Like they might not know what it is, or they may not quite understand it, but as soon as you bring up the word iodine, everyone sort of perks up and wants to know more about it. And iodine is such an important item. We have this intricate mechanism to take iodine from the bloodstream to put it into the thyroid, put it into the breast, put it into the ovaries, the pancreas, the uterus. And it requires two atoms of sodium to do that. So you need adequate amounts of salt to take with the iodine. So I never prescribe iodine without salt, and you need to use the right kind of salt, which is unrefined salt, which you and I are going to talk about in another lecture.
Exactly. Yeah. So we'll put a link to that salt video down below so they can grab that as well. All right. I love how it all comes together. I love how the truth of what works in our body is always going to be what God created us to live on in the first place. And none of this is a surprise to him. As man keeps learning and isolates, then we lose. But as we just see, okay, yeah, but God created, and his nutrients that he created for us create an exponential effect that is life building. We always win. But anytime we're reaching for the lab experiments, we lose. And so that's why we teach the three principles so much here in everything that we teach. Number one, eat the foods that God called good for us. Number two, eat it before it's been turned into a lab experiment. And number three, don't let any food become an addiction, which I don't see iodine become an addiction. So I know we got that one covered, but recognizing though, that even just having an iodine deficiency also changes cravings. It also changes how you eat and why you eat. Would you agree to that?
Absolutely. There was that old, there was a video a few years ago on the guy who ate McDonald's every day for 30 days.
Yeah.
Most of us saw it. He became addicted to it. Now he showed what happened. He became fat. He wasn't fat beforehand. He got gained, I don't know, 30 pounds or something in 30 days. His chemistry went off kilter, became a diabetic. Guy wasn't a diabetic beforehand. So, and he became addicted to it. He started craving it, even though it made him sick when he first started eating it. So the big food companies have figured out that if they put certain chemicals in their food, or they deplete the food of basic nutrients and put these chemicals in, we start craving it. We want more of it. And as you and I talked about before this episode, Big Pharma wants nothing more than to keep us sick. So we're dependent on drugs, and we have to buy these drugs for a long period of time. They don't want to kill us right off the bat. That kills customers. But they want to keep us chronically sick, and there's no better way to do that than put lousy food out there, make us nutritionally deficient, and the blueprint that we were designed pretty well with starts to fall apart, and the biochemistry falls apart. Now, if that's where you're at, that can be fixed. And we work with that every day in our practice, and we see these, we see these results happen. I didn't start off that way as a doctor. I started off conventional doctor. I bought into everything I was taught in med school. I didn't think people ever needed to take a supplement for anything. And I cringe when I think about what I used to tell people back then. But it took me 6 months into practicing medicine to realize, hey, I was wrong. And, I made a 180-degree turn, and it was the best thing I did. Medicine went from being intolerable to practice, and I thought, I can't do this for the next 30 years. To now, 30 years later, that was my calling. I would do it again. I would do it exactly again as I did it, except I would have become holistic in med school a little bit earlier than I did. But, supporting the human biochemistry, supporting the blueprint we were designed to have can yield wonderful results into old age, into very old age. I see patients live very productive, useful, happy lives into old age. And they should be able to do that because we have a perfect design if we just give it its basic raw materials.
That is so true. So our doctor did us a favor when we questioned him about some medications. This was just in our early 40s. And he said, we asked the usual question, well, how long will I need to take this? And he said, for the rest of your life. Well, we took that phrase and decided we are going to do something for the rest of our life. But what we did was we switched to just all natural foods and exercising a little bit better, handling our stress better, and totally changed our life. And within 30 days, we went back, showed him our lab values. And he said, well, you still need to take the medications. You won't be able to keep this up. And we said, yes, we will. Just watch us. And here we are 20 years later, still without all those medications that he was like, it was going to be, it was enough to make wallpaper, in your room. But I knew the words for the rest of your life were not meant to be directed by a physician. They should be directed by our God who created us. And so he promised us he is the one who heals. And that's in Exodus, but he also takes it all the way to the ending of the scripture where he is also in the one who provides for our healing. So I knew when we changed our perspective to eating real food, the way God created it, we were going to win. And that would be for the rest of our life. So this has been very informative. There is so much more we could talk about. I think the books that I've seen on this is probably one of your thicker ones. So, but highly great information. Everyone can take away from this book. You can just put notes in the front of your book, like, okay, where am I going to start? It has great references, and no matter what health challenge you're in, he's going to address it in one way or another. So thank you so much for being a part of this today, and just the simplicity of iodine, very inexpensive. Everyone can make changes in their health by just evaluating where they are with their iodine status. Get your blood work done, work with a physician that is trained in it. And I like the way that is very much specified, that it needs to be someone who's trained in iodine. And both you and other authors are very strict about that, because it's not just a result on a lab. There's more to it than just seeing a result on a lab.
Let me mention, I've been criticized by my holistic colleagues on iodine. There are many people that say they're holistic doctors and they hang a shingle up that says that. And, these are the people who say, well, here's your CoQ10 with your statin drug, and I'm a holistic doctor because I did that.
Exactly.
Or they say, I carry vaccines in my office and you can have vaccines, your choice, even though they know some of these vaccines are causing a lot of problems. I don't consider them holistic doctors. If something's causing a problem, you don't give it, period, no matter how much flack you take. And if something is necessary, you tell them it's necessary. Right. And if a drug is a problem, you don't just prescribe the drug because you're taking insurance and the insurance company dictates that you better have this amount of percentage of patients on this drug or you're not getting your bonus. So you got to be careful out there. And there are many holistic people who don't understand iodine. They suffer from medical iodophobia. And it's important to work with an iodine literate doctor. And they are out there. And I'm on the board of directors for the International College of Integrative Medicine. You can Google them. They have doctors around the country. Now, not all of them are iodine literate, but at least they've heard me lecture on iodine. And, there's doctors out there, and they're becoming more and more out there. But, if you're not happy with your healthcare, if you're not happy with what your doctor's telling you, if your doctor's not working with you, and if your doctor didn't stay open during COVID, my suggestion is find a new doctor. Your doctor should have stayed open during COVID and taken care of sick people face to face, just like we took the oath to do when we graduated from medical school. And those who didn't, well, I say find someone who did. If you're not happy, keep searching for someone who will be your advocate, be your support system, and be your partner. I always tell my patients, you're driving the car medically. I'm just on the sidewalk. I'm running along with you, yelling at you, turn right, turn left, go straight. And you decide which way the wheel's turning. So if I tell them to turn right and they turn left, I said, I'll catch up to you and keep telling you, go straight or turn left now, because it's still your choice. But I said, I'm not giving up the run with you, but you're in charge of things, and I'm going to work with you. So your doctor should talk to you the same way and should feel the same way about you.
All right. That is great. All right, Dr. Brownstein, thank you so much for joining us. Such a wealth of knowledge that everyone can have a takeaway from this, and that's what's valuable to this conversation. So for those of you watching, I just want to say thanks for joining us here at the Biblical Nutritionist. Be sure and hit the like and subscribe so we can stay connected and stay part of the family. If you haven't yet gone to my website, Biblical Nutrition Academy, where we have all of our courses where you can learn even more about God's recipe for excellent health, then I highly recommend you check that out. I'll put links to our courses down below and also for our website. The Bible study Treasures of Healthy Living has an accompanying book called Nutrition Manual. In that, I talk about iodine, so be sure and look that up and learn more about it there. And again, thank you for letting us join you and share with you God's recipe for excellent health. And it does include iodine. You've been so great to have here on this call today, and I appreciate you.